Welcome back to the VDL-V Create Season 8 Week 0 Power Rankings. This is the official Power Rankings. With me here is Miss Mag. Say hi, Miss Mag.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And Gumi. Say hi, Gumi.
Yo, what's up? Your boy Gumi.
So, as per usual, this is opinions. So, don't feel too bad if you think we overrank or underrank your team, or in addition to that, if you think that we missed something. This is just opinions. We have a couple people, but obviously there's some synergies and things that we're going to over undervalue compared to each team. So with that, let's get straight into our 24th ranked team, which is this Scuba Squirtles. I'm going to pass off to Miss Beck. Why do you think this team's at 24?
I think this team is at 24 for two main reasons. One, they don't have any real semblance of a fast mode. Think more Pico's their highest speed mon at like 97 or something. No tailwind setter. It's very consistent that they are going to be playing in TR. And then the second thing is, yes, they are playing in TR, but like no premier redirection of, I would say, average fake out users. So like getting it up is really going to be challenging, I think, for this team. But when they are in it, they're going to be a threat. So I'll give them that.
Yeah, I think when we just look at like max versus non-max, I think TR is a really, really hard mode to use. Especially like when I used it a lot, I think back in season 4. I had a pretty strong TR mode. And it's fairly easy to stall out when you don't have, 130, 140 base power moves, right? So like I think this team is going to win games just because there's going to be some people who you can get Trick Room up against. But I think it's really tough because it's going to be really easy for him to be stalled out. And I don't think he's going to get enough momentum while in Trick Room to be able to win.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. I think that kind of sums up the most ones. I think one of the things I'd like to also mention is I'm never a big fan of Sheninja in a team with a lot of ghost and rock weaknesses, and they have quite a few. So Sheninja seems like a kind of wasted spot a little bit on their team. And then I'm not a big fan of Morpeko as a trick or as a fake out user and a means of setting up Trick Room. So because once it gets in Trick Room, its 97 base speed is really high and it's not bulky at all. So it kind of is a wasted spot after you get Trick Room up.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I guess we can go to number 23, which is myself. Sting like Rubambi. So this is the first time in a while I was not ranked 24th. So I'm definitely a little surprised to see I'm 23rd. Any thoughts on why I'm a little bit higher than I'm expecting?
Yeah, I think that I think the reason at least I liked it so much, like I did rank it last, but I really liked it compared to some of your other teams. Um, was that it's got great fake out. It's got speed control. You got ice wind all over. You have the weather, right? You can get screens up, and you have a lot of offense, right? You have Sand Slash Alola. You have Darmanitan, even Ninetales putting out blizzards and stuff. Rotom, Frost putting out blizzards. Arctivish. So overall, it's got a lot of key components that a lot of times you might not be able to get in a monotype team. And I really love hyper offense. So yeah, when I see just a lot of hyper offense stuff going on, I think it's a pretty solid team. So I'm not surprised people ranked it higher than usual.
Yeah, I kind of, going off of what Gumi said, you do have a lot of those elements that most teams struggle to get, and they're not playing monotype. But at the same time, you also have a very, very strong offensive typing. Like, a lot of people don't even bother picking up ice mons, much less ice resists, and you also have access to probably about half a dozen freeze dry users. So water mons, bulky waters aren't even good enough to stall out your team. That being said, it's still an ice type team, and the fact that it only,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, resists itself on the whole, even though your dual types add certain other resistances, but they also add certain weaknesses, is probably the only thing keeping it out of a higher tier in ranking.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I definitely like my team. Like I said, I got pretty much every Pokemon I wanted, but obviously, as a monotype team, there's some major restrictions there. So with that, I guess we can go up to number 22. Number 22 is the Vienna Vaporeons. I guess, Miss Mag, what are your thoughts on the team?
Oh, first thought is I love Faramosa. I will always appreciate a team that Faramosa is on, especially if it does a good job at supporting what I believe its main sort of roles are. It's a good damage dealer, but more importantly, it's so flexible on the support options with speed, control, and coaching, speed swap. That being said, this team doesn't really have much of a theme that I can see. Like, it's just a little bit. It just seems like sort of like mangled together. Like their Firewater Grass Core is honestly a little bit on the frail side, aside from the Rose Raid, and then the Fantasy Core is just like the Fantasy Core is the better part of the team. The Latios, excuse me, the Rapidash Galar, and the Magnezone make a nice trio, and then there's just like a random Noctowl in there. So I'm not seeing much of a theme here. That's kind of why I ranked it low.
Yeah, like usually when you look at teams, you can see at least like a general strategy or general theme, and I think that is missing here, right? Like, it's like, what does he want to do with Landorus, right? Is it just Earthquake spam with Latias and Noctowl, right? And then even that's not like a really consistent mode. I think Ice types are really good against this team, um, especially if you have Freeze Dry, because especially considering that Blacephalon is a really bad uh resist for stuff because of how frail it is, right? It's just overall, I think it's a little bit just janky and not cohesive.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with that to a certain extent. I definitely think there's a couple of mons that seem like not super exciting. Like the Noctowl seems pretty underwhelming. I don't think it really does anything for their team. And I definitely think that Pheromosa, even though I think it's solid mon, I don't think they have a great partner with Pheromosa per se. I think pretty much Landorus is the only good partner with Pheromosa, like as a support option, like with speed swap or coaching. And I definitely think that's another thing that's a little bit I'm not a huge fan of. But they do have great speed tier. They do got a fast Tel one setter, and they got some good damage output.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I can also agree with that. Like, it's definitely like a solid team by the numbers, but like, I just want to see what they do with it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But with that, let's go up to number 21, which is the Steel Warriors. So, any thoughts on this from y'all side?
Well, the Warrior esports ain't looking too good so far. We'll have to see how they do. But yeah, I think I actually like I have this team week 2, and I've already been prepping for them. And to be honest, like after looking at it, I think this is a team that is going to be harder to prep than it looks on paper. Because I think it definitely there's definitely some stuff I don't like. I don't like that it has no tailwind. I think its fast mode is a little slacking, but I mean he has a lot of offense, a lot of power. I think the other thing is he has basically no physical threat, like Machamp and then Dusknoir, which aren't really physical sweepers. So I think those are problems, but overall, I actually think that this team is a little misleading in terms of prep. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think this has the opposite problem that the Vaporeons had. Whereas you don't know what the Vaporeons were going to do, but their numbers were very nice. I think this has the opposite problem. Like, I could see some very well-defined strategies using this team, but at the same time, I feel like again it struggles in that fast mode component. I think the fastest mon on this team is actually the Meowstic, breaking the 100, and then everything else is like I think that, oh no, actually the Zoric is up there too. But like after that, it kind of really drops off. Like the Venusaur and whatnot come in the middle, and yeah, you have the sun mode for the Venusaur, which is nice, and it's basically a Sunroom team, but I feel like it could be a little bit better crafted. There's just some pieces there that I just don't understand. Like I don't understand why the ice is there. I'm just gonna be real honest. Like I get wanting an ice type, or just like a setup belly drum sweeper type of thing, but I'll be curious to see what they do. I can't count them out yet because it's got some nice pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was one of the my biggest issue with the team is I really like certain aspects of their team, but there's a couple of mons that kind of just seem completely out of place and almost useless on their team. And some of them are even the higher tier mons, which is kind of where it gets a little bit awkward. Like I don't like Regidrago on their team specifically because they don't have any form of speed control, and Regidrago really needs speed control to be a good Pokemon typically. And like Vino Torkoal I think is really good. Dusknoir I think is one of the better tier 2 Trick Room setters. And then Meowstic is a great Trick Room fake out user because it has Prankster in Trick Room. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's a little bit higher. I think I ranked it personally higher than this on my personal rankings, but I can definitely see some of its weaknesses.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know for a fact that I asked them, they did say like the Whiscash pick was something they actually wanted to try, so I wasn't actually factoring that mod into the ones that I don't actually like. But I agree with the Reggie Drago, and I'm still like iffy on the Ice Q. So yeah.
So with that, we can go up to number 20, which is the Atlanta Talonflames. I guess I'll let Gumi start it off.
Yeah, this team should have been ranked higher. I think that there are some like weaknesses with this team. Specifically, like I think there was a lot of complaint about just kind of the middle speed tiers. There's specific ones I don't like. Like I actually don't like Rhyperior here. I'd rather him have something like Crocodile, which is more in that mid speed area and can still do Crobat like Earthquake stuff. But I think this is a really solid team. Like I just don't know how you deal with a lot of this offense, right? You get Crobat and Cinderace. Crobat's firing Screeches. And if you don't have a Mon that's faster than Cinderace, which a lot of teams don't, especially when you look at some of the lower ranked teams, it's going to be really hard to deal with that, right? And you have Tailwind, you have Trick Room, you have good modes. I think that there are some weaknesses on the team. Like, I don't know why Dracloak's there, right? I think that there was a better Mon than Rhyperior. And I'm not sure about Purloin. But other than that, like I think that this team should not have been ranked 20. Like this is a 14, 15, maybe even like yeah, depending on how you see it, top 12. Like it's super offensive, super powerful, and it's going to be hard to deal with some of that.
I can't say that I agree. Honestly, I will say that like some of your points are valid. Like, yeah, the team like spits out offense like crazy. Cinderace, Dragalge, Lele, Crobat. Like, and I gotta put some respect on Glaceon because it's got a base
Yeah,
135 special attack.
Glaceon's
Most
actually really
most people
powerful.
don't actually realize that. EV family going hard. But it's like outside of those five mons, I don't like the rest of this team. I definitely do not like any of their tier fives. Not I just don't see where they fit. Like the Frostmoth, you have a better Tailwind setter in Crobat, and if you're opting for Wide Guard, like I feel like there was a better choice. I really don't know why Dracloak's there. Like zero reason at all. And I'm not like no offense to Matrix, but I don't really understand Willard's role on this team either. I guess you could argue Tailwind Water Spout, but like that's really stretching it. So it's another one of those things where it's like there's some good modes, but again, I don't like the pieces.
Yeah, no, I think I'm a little bit more in the middle. But I do think that a couple like dyssynergies I'm not a huge fan of is like Lele with no really beneficial reason to have psychic terrain and actually having detrimental reasons because you do have a prankster mon. I do agree that some of the lower tier Pokemon seem a little bit awkward. However, I do think that Glaceon and Rhyperior and Lele are pretty good Trick Room like Mons set up or once you set up Tailwind with Crobat. I'm not a huge fan of their Ghost weakness. Their only Ghost resist is Liepard, which is definitely awkward, and so I definitely think that helps like with your opponent's prepping quite a bit. And I think that's kind of one of the big things. A lot of their type charts, they have quite a few weaknesses overall,
Yeah.
and so it's pretty like exploitable and like offensively into their team.
Yeah. I agree with the Lily point. Like, Cinderace Sucker Punch stuff, you don't like that. And there's not actually much that resists Psychic. So you are just giving your opponent a lot of benefit by bringing Psychic Terrain. However, I don't agree with the tier fives point because like I don't like when especially when I draft tier fives, like they're not what I'm looking for in the main bulk of the team. I think Wailord is actually good here because base 90 special attack water spouts with Crobat actually doesn't sound bad. And then you also have a Tailwind mode, so if you bring something, you know, room service, whale lord, water spout. Like I don't think that's it. I think that overall, I don't like some of the picks, but I just don't think this is going to be an easy team to mop because even though they're bad defensively, you're not necessarily going to be a position to exploit that if you're getting demolished by their offense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair point, and I guess sort of contrary to that, I actually like the Purloin on this team because it's one of the few prankster mons that can actually run unburdened. Now it's not super fast like Liepard, but it's not as much of a dyssynergy as it would be with just about any other prankster family.
Agreed.
Yeah. Like I said, I agree. I think the big offense, the multiple very fast Pokemon, and a reasonable trick room mode definitely makes this team better than some of the previous teams, and I could definitely see some arguments it's a little bit higher. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I think we've said enough.
Yeah, I think so.
Up to number 19, we have the Winchese Park Slowpokes. So any thoughts on this with y'all?
Go ahead, Miss Mac.
All right. Yeah. Since you're gonna face them week one, I guess I'll talk first. So I don't like certain parts of this team. Like I'm just gonna be real honest off the bat. I don't understand the reboot pick. Even though I talked a little bit with Adam during the draft about certain picks because he was actually taking things off the board that I kind of liked. But at the same time, like other than that, I really like how he's crafted a team with some really unique pieces. Like Savelli, ironically, is probably at best used on a team with like a really strong prankstermon like Grimmsnarl and so many other threatening offensive pieces that kind of let it just rock and pivot and be annoying. He's got one of the best tailwind setters in the game in Noivern. He's got Serena to counter priority. Yeah, he's even managed to pick up a terrain mode and got the Chlorwitzer down. And of course, his biggest weakness is he has no TR setter, so like his slow bonds really can't benefit. But that just means he'll probably run them fast with Tailwind, so that'll be pretty interesting. But yeah, seems the right ranking for it.
Yeah, I think you could argue for it maybe just a little higher. Like 19 feels a little low. However, I think that I really actually don't like just kind of how little offense there is. Like I don't know. I don't think like Sereni isn't necessarily the most offensive on. I used Noivern last season and it's not, it's got like 90 85 base special attack and attack, right? Grimmsnarl, I think that most times you're gonna want to run Prankster. And then like I think Pinkirchen with Rising Voltage, okay, like and Clawitzer, but they're also really slow. Steelix as well. I think that this team kind of lacks some speed and offense. I think that some teams are gonna have a hard time breaking through screens and breaking through some of the more defensive pieces like Felix under a light screen with an AV. But at the end of the day, I think that this team maybe just lacks a little offense and specifically special offense.
So with me, like I think Grimmsnarl is an amazing, powerful Pokemon. I think Noivern is a powerful Pokemon. There's some like nice Pokemon I like generally. I think one of the big things which one of y'all said was they have a lot of really slow Pokemon that really don't do much except in Trick Room, specifically Pincurchin. Steelix is a little bit better out of Trick Room, but Pincurchin is definitely a huge Trick Room mon. It's not super bulky. They don't have a lot of Pokemon that I think are like great Tailwind mons, so mons that are like kind of in the middle speed tier with a lot of offense. And so I don't put as much value in the Noivern, which is, like obviously it does other things, but for the most part, its strength is a relatively fast Tailwind. And so that definitely is something that is a little bit concerning with me. However, I do think, just off the back of, fast Pokemon and some fast offense, with like Terrakion and Grimmsnarl with Prankster, they have some good things with them. And then their fighting weakness is a little awkward, which makes the Silvally makes me want Silvally kind of to be almost always a fighting resist.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, especially with Silvally. I haven't necessarily found a team that I like Silvally a lot just because like you kind of need a team that's really versatile on typing and isn't relying on a certain weakness or resistance. So I think that's a good point. Like it's just hard to bring like Savali has really strong normal sets, but it's just hard to bring those when you're already suffering from, you know, a fighting type weakness. So I think that's a pretty solid point.
So with that, we can continue on to number 18, which is the Bistro Bewares. I'm going to start off with Gumi because I think Gumi has a hot take on this team.
Yeah, I like Troy. He's a good guy. But I hate this team. This team is, in my opinion, like I rank this 23. I really do not like this team. And here's the main reason. Number one, um, your fastest mon is Entei. And so, but like, I don't think you have a really good fast mode at all. And then I think leaning so much into that Ndidi Hadarini, I think is just, it's easily exploitable, especially in a format where so many people are bringing spread moves and there's a lot of strong steel types. I don't think Ndidi Hadarini is strong at all. And then I think you're just going to get destroyed by people who have good imprisoned Trickermons, most of which, by the way, are bulky psychic types. So if you don't have like Trickroom set up, then I don't think Entei and Luxor are actually going to pull the weight for this team. I really don't think that this is a strong team at all, and I don't think Altaria Tailwind is going to make up for that slow mode. Most of the times, you're going to want to bring a team of Entei, Ndidi, Hadarini, Araquanid, Luxray. It's just not a very solid, consistent team, and a lot of those mons have similar weaknesses. So, yeah, I really, really do not like this team. I think Ndidi F is so good, but I think that you lean too much into that trigger mode where I just don't think it's versatile enough, and it's going to be easy to predict what you're going to do week to week.
Wow, I don't think I can follow that up at all. That was pretty good. At least for that. I can't say I agree completely with you, though you made some actually really strong points. Uh the main thing I personally don't like about this team is really the coughing. This team is actually very dependent on its abilities, and I can never see a reason to ever bring coughing. Like even if it's just to mess with the opponent, like you need all of your abilities. You need your magic bounce. You need your inner focus. You need your unburden. You need your water bubble. So that was like a big red flag for me, which is kind of why I rank this team around like I think I ranked it 17 actually. So not too far off from where it is now. That being said, I do actually disagree. I don't think Ndidi Hat is as horrible as you say. I feel like it is a mode that still deserves and earns respect despite the similar sort of weaknesses. And Arachnid on its own, regardless of what mode it's in, is can be very bulky and very difficult to deal with while still dealing a lot of damage, no matter how low you've actually invested into offense. But yeah, I will agree that there are definitely some pieces here and some synergies that need a little bit more refinement. Like the Leafeon is another one where it's like there's no way to set up Sun on this team without like unburden Hitmonlee, and that is, in my opinion, way too much effort. So yeah, that's kind of where I put it a little bit higher than some of the teams we've ranked below, but it needs a little bit of polishing.
So yeah, I think I personally like Indy Hatterene. I think that's one of the reasons I ranked him higher than a lot of the lower teams. I think they have a very solid trick room mode. I do think that there are there's a couple mons like you said. The coughing is a big one that doesn't seem great. Leafeon is a Pokemon I think is only okay. It's really only got grass coverage, which kind of makes it a little bit restrictive in my mindset. But I do think that Cryogonal having pretty good base speed, Entei I think is a great mon, and I think that despite it not being the most conventional, I think a non psychic drain and DD faking out can do a lot of wonders for the team too. But I think there's nothing that super excites me with this team, but there's nothing I actively dislike other than the coughing specifically.
I think if you like Indeed Hatterini, it makes sense why this team is ranked 18. But I don't. I think it's just a very predictable and trash mode. But that's just my personal opinion. Like, I think this team is gonna win some weeks. Like, it's got Indeed Hatterini, and that can just win games if your opponent's not paying attention. And Araquanid is obviously pretty good. So, but in my opinion, it's just like 4 good mons, and then I don't know. I don't really like it. But
Well, I think
I don't think I think you can still win games, of course.
I think that's the big deciding factor. Basically, if Hatterene NDD is a good core and it's does well, this team is going to do very well, and we probably underrank them. If that core doesn't do well, then we probably overrank them, and it's basically just going to kind of come down to how that works. I think for the most part.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, it's still week 0, so a lot of this is all going to be based on like theory and knowledge of what the mons can do. It doesn't take into account any playstyles or games that have happened already.
Yep, that's another thing that's noteworthy before we move on is just so you know this is nothing to do with coach skill. This is exclusively based on the team composition as well. Just so y'all know. Continuing on, we can go to number 17, which is the Queen City Quagsires. I'll start off with Miss Mag.
All right. This team. Oh, this was also one of my lower ranked teams. Yeah. I again. So caveat. So sort of preface for my personal rankings. A lot of teams that I ranked in, I would say at least the bottom 8 is not that I thought your comps were horrible. It's mainly that I think there were either synergies that were colliding with each other, or there are pieces of the team that I personally think could have been better optimized. This is another one of those teams where like there are just pieces that I really think could have been better optimized. But I will start with the things that I like. I actually like the Pelipper Seismitoad. I'm a little biased. I'm using that in a different league now. It puts in work. I also really like the Toxicroak kind of supporting it. Like there's coaching capabilities. There's moderately fast fake out. I think it's like base 84. Like it's all right. Like it's not great, but it's all right. You got a whole bunch of like support moves. So I like that trio. I also like the Zapdos. I think it kind of rounds out this like rain mode theme that's going on. And I do like the Herdier is like a nice tier 5 sort of just annoying, bulky, intimidate, snarl, helping hand kind of spam bot. Outside of that, I can't say I really like. I definitely don't care for the fantasy core too much. Like Hydreigon and Gardevoir are strong mons on their own, but Gardevoir is, in my opinion, not the greatest trick room setter. Not when you don't have like either a really strong fake out user or some redirection. And Lorantis really thrives when you get Trick Room up. So it just kind of feels a little bit at odds. Same with the Carrot Costa. Like, you need good fake out to even make good use of, like, Shell Smash, in my opinion. Yeah, you could go for Sturdy, and it has Swift Swim, so, like, it's okay. But I still think it would thrive better with a more firm, slow speed control option. And then, like, Rapidash is all right. It's not my favorite fire type down in the low tiers, so like it is good for what it can do, and it kind of clashes a bit with rain. Like there aren't too many things it can do as a fire type with some rain synergies. And then scissors all right. I can put some respect on scissor, but yeah, it's just some of those parts there that in my opinion need a little bit more optimization.
Yeah, I actually think that my problem with this team is like, okay, I love a lot of the pieces. Like I think Scizor Rain is good. I like Pelipper Seismitoad. I think Zapdos, Hydreigon, Gardevoir, Toxicroak, Lurantis, even Caracasta, Rapidash, Herdier. Like I like almost all the mons. But actually like all the mons on this team, just the singular mons, right? My problem is I don't like how too heavily it leans on rain. Like I think so. Like right now, I'm running a rain team in another draft league, which is like has a rain mode and then has a Metagross mode, and like I can run both or I can run one. But I think the thing I don't like about this team is that it feels like without rain, he's gonna struggle a little bit. I think that without rain, Scizor really struggles. But then I also think that like there's not gonna be a single week where you aren't going to run Rain, and that's dangerous. That's really bad. Because Rain is just so strong on this team where it's gonna be easy for people to tech things like Sunny Day or even tech their own like Thunder weather ball moves, right? I just think that I think this actually team could be higher because I think that it actually has a lot of strong pieces, but I'm not a fan of just how heavily it leans to that arena mode.
So yeah, so looking at mine, I like the Seismitoad, Pelipper, Zapdos, Sizzler core. I think that's a good core, and I think Toxicroak is also good. I'm not a huge fan of Caracasa. It doesn't do much, in my opinion, that Seismitoad doesn't. So definitely think you could have done kind of a completely different mon, especially because both of your Swift Swim users have a 4 times weakness to grass, and so if you have a concern about Swift Swim specifically, you can kind of just have guaranteed way to deal with them with graph coverage. So but I definitely like a lot of those. The big core, I think Herdier is one of the better tier fives. It's quite annoying. My biggest issue with the team is that if you look at the image, everything is kind of around Pelipper, and Pelipper, sadly, I don't think is the greatest Pokemon. It's their only Tailwind user. It's their it's their weather. So I feel like almost every week they kind of are going to be forced to bring Pelipper, which is bad in the context of predictability and, in addition, it not being the best like general Pokemon outside of its ability and moves.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I think one of the things that also makes this team just a little bit worse than some rain teams is there's no rod support. There's no lightning rod support anywhere on this team, which means that Seismitoad kind of switching in or being able to be like support for those electric weak mons is going to keep it from doing its job as a rain sweeper a little bit more often than not.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess we can move up to number 16, which is the MK Mimikyus. So I guess I'll start off with Miss Mag.
I like this team. Like to me, it was just all right. I'm a big fan of Nigonadel. I think it is a little bit pricey in tier one, I will admit, but it's got such a really strong offense combined with some really annoying support options and a blisteringly fast speed tier that I think make it a worthy choice, especially on a team like this where like you have a lot of pieces that are a little bit on the slower side, like the Aegislash and the Center Scorch, which are like a little bit mid speed tier. I like the little Sandcore he's picked up. I'm actually a big fan of the Baby Hippo. I think it's a perfectly fine EVL Mon, and the Stoutland is a very flexible Sand Rush / Intimidate piece where he doesn't even need to bring the Hippo with it every week. Big fan of the Thunditherian. I think that's a nice pickup, and I do like Tapu Fini. But to me, there isn't anything like really strong that I like dislike about this team, but there isn't anything that I really like love about this team other than like some of the individual pieces.
I rate this team like I think top 10, maybe probably not top 5.
You
But I think pretty
you
high.
you put it at 3.
Did I put it top 3? Okay, yeah. I love this team. This team is great. This team is so solid. Okay, number 1, you got some bulkiness with Fini and Aegislash. Nice bulk. You got some strong, super strong offensive pieces with Aegislash, Thundurus, and Nagando. You got some good fast mons. You got some good slow mons. You do have Tailwind and Trick Room. Not my favorite setters, especially them both being psychic, but setters nonetheless. And some of these modes, man, like maybe I shouldn't be revealing this, but Telepathy Finny goes so hard on this team, right? Like, there's some really solid stuff here. I think this team is top 3 on mine because it's so powerful, it's so bulky. You got Intimidate Stoutland, you got some really strong mods in general. Yeah, this team is crazy. This team is nice.
So I really like Tapu Fini Thunderous core. I think that is a really good core. Thunderous is a really good switch in to it, and even next to each other, they're very good. You can run telepathy and discharge something like that if you don't want to set up a Misty Terrain. I definitely think that core is very good. I also think that Nagandal is a pretty good mon to pair next to Tapu Fini as well, just because they don't have many shared weaknesses. And I think the fast, good offense is pretty good. Light is not my favorite unburdened mon, but I think it is pretty good in the general sense. My main issue is that kind of, you know, a little bit different than what you were saying is I don't like the fact that a lot of their major offensive mons are very frail. Mainly being Thunderous and Naganadol and Aegislash though is not always frail. It can be very frail if it's caught in short sword mode. And so that's kind of my big issue. And a lot of the other mons that aren't super offensive, you know, are pretty. A lot of the more bulky mons aren't super offensive. Offensive. So that's kind of my thoughts. But I do really like some of the cores.
You actually, just to add on to that, you made me realize something that I also really do like about this team. I like the combination of Finny and Avalug because Avalug is basically a check to every opponent that says, "Do you have enough special attackers?" And then Finny brings Misty Seed, which can give it a little bit of a boost in that department. But at the same time, I have noticed that a lot of this team's offensive pieces are actually weak to Edgequake. That's rock and ground coverage. So I think that will be something that this coach has to kind of contend with every week. And they do have a few wide guard users for the more common, you know, moves of those typings like Rock Slide and Earthquake, but it is still a little bit shaky because those are two very common offensive typings. So we'll see how they use it to their advantage.
Yeah. With that, we can continue on to number 15. Number 15 is the Alola Arachnids. I'm going to start off with Gumi.
Yeah, so I think I ranked this team around 15. Sorry, give me 1 second. I need to. I was off the slides for a second, so I forgot their team. Yeah. So this team obviously has a very very strong trigger mode, right? You got Slowbro, Amoonguss. I love those two. Really strong regenerator core. And then you have some really strong offensive pieces in Crawdot and Turtonator. The thing I don't like about this team is the fast mode. I think that's why it's ranked so low. I think Moltres is good, but I don't think it's good like as a standalone piece with Comfy. I don't think that's going to be the way where it's like best used. And I'm not sure how I feel about some of the other pieces like Rotom or even Diggersby on this team. To be honest, like I think there's just some things missing. Like I think there's some things that could be improved, and I also don't like Trick Room that much. So even though he has a strong Trick Room mode, I think he's gonna struggle with speed control this season.
So yeah, I guess I'll go up. So I personally think that the Comfy Moltres kind of core, which is what they started with, is pretty good. However, I really don't like how their fastest Pokemon is Kadabra, and their only other Pokemon that's 100 or more speed is Comfy, and it basically doesn't matter its speed. It's just always bringing triage basically, and so the team looks pretty slow when I look at it in my mind. And there's a couple Pokemon that I think are not great without some sort of support, namely like Tailwind. I don't like Diggersby. I don't like Crawdont that much without some sort of Tailwind support or consistent speed control because they are pretty frail mons that have really high attack, but they have like a middling speed tier in addition to that not great bulk. However, I do really like the Trick Room mode, and I definitely think that it's definitely going to win them some games. But Crawdont and Diggersby being a little bit awkward speed tier for Trick Room is also a little annoying for me.
So I have to say I believe this was in my top 10, I'm pretty sure. I actually really do like this team, and I'm slightly biased. I did actually help draft portions of this team. So one of the things that I think this team's biggest strength is, in spite of the non-existent, like, really fast mode, this team just has a lot of bulk. Like, it's just phenomenally a generally bulky team, and then it's augmented by the fact that Comfy gets literally +3 priority floral healing. It's basically +3 priority recover to anything that this team wants to keep healthy. And I think that combined with the regenerated core, like, you're just gonna wear people down over time, no matter how fast you happen to be. Much less if you manage to get Trick Room up. Then at the same time, you have to contend with the spore pressure for the Amoonguss. Kadabra, while being their fastest mon, does actually offer some level of speed control, and it's immune to flinch because of inner focus. And Rotom, Togedemaru Mario also offer some level of speed control on their own way with Electro Web. I do think that this team will struggle against teams with not necessarily faster mons, but just better, more consistent speed control, like a really consistent Tailwind setter, a really consistent Trick Room setter and sweeper. So maybe there's some optimization to be done in that department, but I don't think it's terribly balanced as a team.
Well, yeah, no, I think I really like quite a few bit of parts of it. I personally love the Amoonguss slow growth core. I think it's just an amazing core. But definitely, and I think Moltres is one of the better Pokemon in Tier One, honestly. And so I definitely take those pretty high value personally. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I'll say I do like Slowbro a lot, but I'm not a fan of Slowbro Amoonguss because um I don't like how weak it is to grass. And to be honest, like I'm actually not a fan of kind of how this team does against grass types. And now, like, that's not necessarily going to be a big problem. But your two ones are Moltres and Turtonator, and Air Slash isn't a very consistent move. And Amoonguss isn't doing too much damage. And Turtonator doesn't have the best stats and usually needs some setup. So I don't know. I just have some problems there. Like I don't think it is necessarily all intact defensively, which I think is a little hard for a trickery mode. So I mean I love Slowbro. I I kind of praised it a lot back in the day when back in season 3, but yeah, I don't know. I'm a little mixed on this team. Like I think 15 is good for it, but I don't necessarily see the top 10.
Yeah, that's fair. So with that, we can move on to number 14, which is Rebellion. So for anyone who didn't notice, Rebellion did a mono type team, but it's mono first generation Pokemon. So hopefully you can notice that now on the screen. But with that restriction, I personally really like their team. I think Kangaskhan is one of the better fake out mons. I think that like Dragonite is an underrated tier 1 mon. I think Arcanine is one of the better fire mons, period. And I definitely think that some of the faster speed and Gengar and Dugtrio are pretty important. I'm not a huge fan of Vulpix specifically. I think I've said this many times before, and I'll probably say it many times in the future. I prefer higher tier weather setters and lower tier weather abusers because I feel like it's awkward to kind of bring a bad mon to make a mon kind of viable. But I definitely think that there's some nice things going on for this team. Any thoughts on you, Miss Beck?
I also really do like this team. I think the theme was very creative. It was restrictive, but not so restrictive that the team kind of looks like hot garbage. Just to be honest, and even like it's ranked higher because it even has more synergy under that restriction than some of the teams we've ranked lower than it. The Butterfree is a very good piece that deserves a lot of respect. I had it last season. I did not abuse it to its fullest potential. I strongly doubt that the coach will do the same. I think he will use it to its utmost potential. But you've got a nice little shell smash mode. You've got a nice little beat up mode. You've got like Kangaskhan's like one of the best fake out users in the game, and you got a nice little mini Sun core. Uh, there's not really too much this team could ask for. I think my only real snub at this team, aside from the fact that yeah, the restriction does mean they drafted some mons with slightly lower BST than I think they obviously probably would have if they were drafting without the theme. I think it's just a little bit soft in Trick Room. Like, I don't see anything terribly slow here. I think Wigglytuff might actually be the slowest. And it's not the most offensive piece under Trick Room, so it might struggle a little bit there. But other than that, I really like this team.
Yeah, I think I had this top. I think I had the 7 or 8. I really like this team. I think you have a lot of solid modes. I personally don't find being soft in Trick Room that annoying. Like sure it's a good thing to have, but like I don't know. I just really like this team. I think it's got some good stuff, got some good offense. I'm not sure how I feel about some of the like special offense because like Blastoise is good and Gengar is really really good, but I think he's missing a little bit of that in my opinion. But like other than that, I think it's just a really nice team. Got some good stuff.
Well, yeah. One of the things that's a little awkward is I'm normally a fan of having a Darkmon on your team, and obviously in first generation there are no Darkmons, and so that's one of the annoying things for me personally. But I definitely think that I ranked them around this rank personally. I'm a big fan of the team overall. Any other thoughts before we move on?
You missed a couple of vital special attackers on this team with the Dragonite, and the Arcanine is flexible in that way. Even Vileplume has a relatively decent special attack stat, so I don't think it's as soft on special attackers as you might think it is.
Yeah,
Sure, I
Magneton has
did
120
primarily
base
mean.
special attack.
Yeah,
Wait,
see,
what?
there you go. Magneton.
Oh yeah,
Tier
so I
5.
really like Magneton. Yeah, I think Magneton's one of the best tier 5s. But ultimately, I didn't mean primarily special attackers, right? I think it's just kind of like it's just obvious that Arcanine and Dragonite have just better physical moves. Um, not like yeah, I just meant primary, right? Like at the end of the day, if I'm choosing who I want, I'd rather have Dragonite and Arcanine as physical instead of special. And so I just think that it Blastoise and Gengar is the only Blastoise, Gengar, Magneton is the only like fast special attackers. A little sus, but again, I still think it's a top 10 team. So
So with that, let's move on to number 13, which is the Bolden Bashers. I'm going to start here because I want to talk about this. I did not like this team at all. I'm not gonna not gonna sugarcoat it. I hate the fact that their only fake out user is Pikachu. I think Pikachu is not great at all. In addition to it, its lightning rod ability is not super relevant on their team. I I love Shuckle. Shuckle is my favorite Pokemon generally speaking, aesthetically, but I don't think it does a lot on their team. I definitely don't think that Tornadus seems like the best fit on their team as a tier 1. I don't know necessarily what I'd want over it, but I'm not a huge fan of its Tail 1 support. I used it last year. I'm not a big fan of it in general, so I definitely with that I think Adelgos is also a Pokemon that doesn't seem great. I do like Oranguru and some of their Trick Room components. I do think that Hippowdon is very good mon, and Dracovish is one of the better, if not the best, Sand Rush users. So they have that going for it. So I wasn't putting it in like my bottom, like my lowest picks, but I definitely put it in the bottom. You know, it was not above 20 on my personal rankings.
and so okay, you threw a little shade at Tornadus, which I disagree with. But other than that, I think this is just a Goomer team, and so I rate Goomer teams based on how they are compared to other Goomer teams. Um, I don't think I necessarily ranked this too. I think I ranked it like 14. So like around the same ranking as this. I think Goomer will make it work, and I think that I think it's got some nice pieces with Cursula, Oranguru, the Dracovish and Hippowdon, the Tornadus, the Klinklang. I'm not a fan of Weezing on this team. I'm also not a fan of Pikachu or Shuckle. Eldegoss I like, but I don't see how it comes in. I don't know what he has planned for it because it's a little underwhelming. But I don't know. I think this is an alright team.
Wow, I have to say, this is probably, it's not my favorite team, but I ranked it number 5.
What?
I did not take the fact that Goomer is piloting this team into account. I actually looked at this pretty objectively, and the thing I like about this team is like there are some very obvious modes, but a lot of the synergies are like very subtle, and I think that is what makes it really dangerous. Like, so for example, sand mode, like we see Hippo, Dracovish. Yeah, I'm pretty sure every coach that has this guy on their schedule is going to at least prep for that. You put respect on Dracovish. Torn is very difficult to deal with in terms of stopping Tailwind from going up, just because it's as simple as protect against the fake out, click Tailwind in a lot of ways. It also offers a nice blistering offense with some hurricanes, some air slash, some heat waves. But I really think the unsung heroes on this team are the Trick Room components. Like Oranguru and Cursula under Trick Room are absolutely insane. And Cursula's move pool is absolutely disgusting. It has so many coverage moves and a base 145 attack or a special attack to boot that I think it'll probably be doing so much of the work. And then you throw in the instruct support right next to it. I don't really know how we let him kind of get away with this. And the Shuckle actually even has really good support moves to support that sort of little trick room package. He shored up a little bit of the intimidate weakness for some of the physical threats on the team with the Passimian. The Clang Clang is a nice flexible piece that can work kind of in tailwind and also be a backup trick room setter. I will admit I'm not the fondest of the Pikachu, but I mean, at the point in the draft where he had to pick it up, like you need a fake out mon with these kind of pieces. And I'm not like the biggest fan of Aldegloss, but that's also because I don't know really what it's going to do. But the subtle synergies are what, in my opinion, rank this as a top 5 team. Like there's just a lot of phenomenally strong Pokemon that are present here.
Honestly, like I get some of the subtle synergies, but no, okay. So like for example, when I look at the Trick Room team, Trick Room mode, I mean it's Dark Week. It's like really really Dark Week. Um, this team doesn't have redirection, so getting that Trick Room up isn't going to be necessarily too easy. I also have said in the past I'm actually not too big of a fan of Trick Room, so I guess that's just my personal preference. That's where I'm at. Um, but then I also think that like this fast mode is pretty mediocre. And there's not any specials, like really special support in the fast side other than Tornadus, which again, Air Slash as a move is inconsistent. So I don't know. I think it's got some stuff, and like that's why I ranked it like 14. But I really don't see the top 5. I really don't.
Well, that's fair. As you can see, this is why the team ended up being around 13. We have some coaches who thought it was in the bottom, 20 or below 20. Some people who thought it was in the top 5, and some coaches that thought it was around, 13. Um, you know, so we can kind of see that. We can talk about this team so much, but I think we'll move on and go up to 12, which is the rolled gold pretzels. I guess I will start. I personally like your team, Gumi. I am a fan of Tauros in the general sense. I think it is a very good mon. It's a great speed tier with Intimidate and Sheer Force. I think that Regieleki is a fairly good form of speed control with the Electro Web and, hitting an Electro Web next to something like an Nidoqueen or a Moltres or a Tapu Bulu, letting them outspeed and hit with their really high offense is really good. I think Berserker is a good fake out user. It's a little bit slow for me sometimes, but I do think it has good strength. Yeah. I and so those kind of the some things. I know you really really wanted to draft Kingdra this season. I don't see it as the best mon on your team. It seems okay. I don't think it looks bad, but I'm not 100% sold on it yet. So I'm curious to see what you're going to do with that. So, Miss Mag, what are your thoughts?
I also really like this team. As the coach that drafted Regieleki last season in the uh, VDL-V Create division, I have to say that you made a much better Regieleki team than mine. Hands down. I think you have actually supported it a lot better, not only just covering up its solitary weakness with a lot of those pieces like the Moltres, the Lunatone with the Levitate is really nice, actually. And the Bulu setting up the grassy terrain, which stops the earthquakes and the bulldozes. But it's just like a really phenomenally put together team on offense, which I know is like kind of your style, but it's also a little bit more bulky, where Regieleki is like super frail and it benefits from having a lot of bulk around it so that you could even lean screens and speed control more often than having to rely on Regieleki to actually deal some damage. But at that point, I would have to agree with Batista. Like, I like the Kingdra and I like the potential that Kingdra has on this team, but like as a standalone, like I've never been a fan of manual weather in the general sense, so I can't say that I like it on your team per se. But I'm still curious to see what you will do with it, and I actually think you did a good job with making sure your team is not terribly soft to Trick Room. I know that's not one of your favorite things, but the Spiritomb and the Berserker are like really good Trick Room checks, and even Lapras honestly can function fairly fine under Trick Room. So, nice job.
Yeah, if I was thinking about this team subjectively, I would have ranked my team number 2. I really love this team. This is probably the best non-max team I've drafted, in my opinion. I think this team is so good. Um, I strongly disagree with you guys on Kingdra because I generally think it's the second best tier 2, and I know that's like everyone's gonna be like, "You serious?" But anyway, yeah, I'm a big fan of this team. I just think it's got a lot of power, but also a lot of bulk. So yeah, I'm a fan. I like it.
Yeah. So one more thing that I do want to mention that I other than all the good things I said, I also do feel the team revolves a little bit more around Regieleki than like revolves quite around Regieleki in my opinion, and so I definitely can imagine it being a little bit predictable in that aspect.
Yep, I see that, and yeah, I think that's actually probably the biggest criticism I have of this team was the reason I wanted like Drampa and stuff was so I could get actually a tailwind setter in Talonflame. And so I don't really like how necessary Regieleki is for speed control. And I think that's kind of like the one problem. However, since yeah, I mean you guys have actually been prepping with me, so you know kind of some of my thoughts on how I've been prepping, where I think that this it is maybe not as reliant on Eliki as it looks from the surface. So
So with that, we can move up to number 11, which is the New York Metstronomes.
bro,
I'll
this is
keep,
There's the
crazy.
Drampa.
There's my grandpa.
so I know that I believe Gumi has a pretty hot take on this one as well. So I'm going to let them talk first.
So I said subjectively I'd put my team at number 1. And the reason my team at number 2. And the reason I put my team at number 2 is because this team is number 1. Because this team is crap. This team is broken, dude. Okay, you got the Aerodactyl. You got the Terror. You have the strongest physical attacker in the game with Urshifu. You have one of the strongest special attackers with Neo King. You got Clefairy to take those hits. You got Lopunny, fast fake out. You got you actually have Manectric and Maractus, which aren't necessarily the best, but I like the fact that like they take electric and water hits well. And then, hey, I don't like Trick Room too much, but one thing I do like is I like a soft Trick Room mode. So having Bronzong and Grandpa, both of which don't need Trick Room to function, but like can be a really strong option, is incredible. You have Kingler, which is very solid. Hemor has kind of popped off the past 2 seasons. So there you go. I think this team is ridiculous. Bro, I don't know how you stop half of this offense. Like Lopunny fake out, boom. You have Lopunny, Nidoking, Aerodactyl, Urshifu, or like Fairy and and 3 of those. Like this team is so ridiculously strong. It's insane.
So me looking at it, I definitely think that I honestly might have ranked it lower than it should have been. I do think that their team has a lot of really good Trick Room mons, so mons that get rewarded by or not Trick Room Tailwind mons that get rewarded for setting up Tailwind. Like Nidoking is one of the better options in my opinion. So say was Kingler. I definitely think those can be really good at once at reasons to set up Tailwind. I do agree that they have very good offense, and honestly speaking, the team seems like a very good Clefairy team. I think Clefairy seems to synergize very well with the team. The team has a lot of mons that are kind of frail on certain aspects, and so the redirection support and the friend guard support seems like it could be really impactful. So, for example, Dazzling Gleam into Urshifu isn't 100% a death if Clefairy's out because of friend guard. Or, Nido King becomes a somewhat bulky mon next to the Clefairy. And then I agree, Bronzong, I think, is one of the better kind of splash Trick Room mons because it's a mon that you don't really need to set up Trick Room for it to be a good mon. However, it can set up Trick Room very well.
Okay, I guess it is my turn. So, the first thing I'm going to say about this team, it's got the best fantasy core of the entire draft. Like, it's not even a question anymore. Clefairy, Bronzong, and Drampa, I don't know how we let you draft all 3 of those willingly. It's such a strong fantasy core, and what I really like about it in particular is not only that they kind of like form this little trick room package, but they also cover both ends of the spectrum like offensively, and they also can kind of flexibly work in it. Like you can set up with both of these mods, like Kama and Drampa with Roost, kind of like obnoxious when you factor in friend guard support from the Clefairy, and then Berserk boost from Drampa every time you drop it below half its health. So well done on that part. The other thing I really like about this team is the abilities are all really nice. There's a lot of like anti fire, water, grass, electric abilities with lightning rod, storm drain, flash fire, sap sipper, which I think makes this team easily a top 10. Like it kind of gatekeeps a lot of the other teams that are not this high on the list because it's got good synergies, it's got good modes, and it's got good offensive and defensive balancing. I will say the one thing I don't like about this team is it's kind of been said already, but like I do think the offensive pieces are a little bit on the frailer side, and I think that means Clefairy is going to be having to do a lot of the heavy lifting for this team. That being said, if they can manage to get a good grasp on speed control and put in a good amount of chip, this team definitely is going to win some games, like hands down.
Yeah, bro. This team cracked.
Well, yeah,
Who wants
It's
to be
very
taking over
good.
voices from Grandpa? That's insane.
but yeah, no, I definitely think this team was probably a little bit underrated, but I think it's a very good team, and all the teams in the top 10 are pretty good. One other thing, just to mention, Drampa doesn't get roosted anymore, just so you know.
Oh, that's so sad. Probably
Yeah.
good for us, though.
Yeah. Anyways, continuing on up to number 10, we have the Grandma's Togekiss. I will throw it to Gumi. What is your thoughts?
Yeah. Actually, the thing that kind of first impressed me about this team was when we were talking about drafting. A couple of us. I remember Matrix telling me back when they had drafted Whimsicott, like, oh, their next pick should be Metagross because it's really good with Whimsicott. And I think this team has just a lot of pieces like that. It's obviously kind of Whimsicott focused, in my opinion. Fake Tear, Sunny Day. I'd assume beat up Flink shenanigans with Metagross. So it's got some stuff like that, but it's just a really solid team. Mienshao, Whimsicott, Metagross, Charizard, all really solid mons. I also think Golisopod is really good, and I like it a lot. And then you have Intimidate with Quillfish, strong offense, and Guzzlord. I really like Guzzlord. And then Lightning Rock is also a pretty underrated pick as well. So overall, I think that this team is just good stuff. Like just really solid stuff. And the fact that somebody like Matrix, was like, this is the mon to go, and that's exactly what they picked is just kind of shows that I think they have some smart drafting. So
Yeah, I also have to say I was a fairly big fan of this team. I believe I ranked this team number 12 actually, so not terribly far from where it averaged out. I agree, they have a lot of nice pieces. Whimsicott is very essential to this team's success in a lot of ways. And the fact that they managed to pick up a really equally fast fake out mon in the Mian Xiao that has inner focus just kind of adds to how good this team is. But at the same time, I think one of the sort of like the weaker elements of this team is like aside from a few choice mons like the Metagross and the Golisopod and the Guzzlord, technically, there's not like a terrible amount of bulk going around. Like, yeah, they have Intimidate support, and they have some other ways to like set up screens and stuff, but I think it's a little bit on the frail side. And there's me and like Unfezant's not like the greatest tailwind setter, I'll be honest, but I do understand why it's here, and I probably think it's better here than on some other teams. But for the most part, they got some solid modes, some solid mons, but it's all right. Just a little frail for my liking.
I disagree with the Infestant specifically. Uh, Tailwind with Whimsicott kind of nullifies it, and Charizard being a faster mon with higher stats and flying coverage kind of removes it as an offensive mon in my mind. So that's my biggest complaint of their team as a whole is that Infestant seems like a completely wasted pick. I think, like you said, both y'all said, Whimsicott and Metagross I think is an amazing combination. I think Gliscopod in general is a very good mon. Me and Shao, I think, is one of the better fake out mons and one of the better fighting mons, in all honesty. And Chandelure is an amazing offensive threat if you can set up Trick Room, or Tailwind, I mean. And then in addition, it can also set up Trick Room or Reverse Trick Room on this team. So I definitely like a fair amount of that aspect. I'm not the biggest fan of Charizard specifically. Um, I definitely, I don't know if there's a better option per se, but I do see like Sunny Day Whimsicott if you want to do that, or Tailwind making Charizard pretty fast. But Charizard without the sun's damage output isn't the greatest.
So I would like to go ahead and disagree with your point on Pheasant. I know it's probably not, where where we want to disagree on this team, but I think Pheasant is a little bit of an interesting one because, as you said, he has Tailwind and he has the offense with Charizard, but he specifically doesn't have a physical offensive flying type. And Brave Bird crit stab goes hard. One of the things I actually don't like about a lot of the flying mons in the meta right now, like even looking at my own team with like Moltres, is that so many moves are inconsistent. Like it's really hard to bring Hurricane without rain, and then Air Slash is just a kind of weak, inaccurate move. So overall, I actually kind of like Unpheasant just as a pick in general, but I also kind of disagree a little with Miss Mag on the bulk. Like Guzzlord's pretty bulky, Metagross pretty bulky. Obviously Chandelure isn't that bulky, and there's some other picks like that, like Charizard. But overall, I think it's got a good balance. Like I think it's really strong, and I think Charizard with Sunny Day, even if it's manual, is still nice, and it's still something that your opponent has to prep for. So I think it's pretty solid. But I don't know where I rated it, but looking at it right now, it looks like a top 5 team to me. So I think it looks solid.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree on the Guzzlord take. Having drafted it last season myself, I think that I'm not saying it's not bulky. I think its bulk is a little deceptive because most of it is in its HP stat, which is humongously large, but its actual like base defense is a lot of strong stab hits. Really, on its weak points, can still give it a lot of trouble.
Okay, so
Not saying it's not good, but I wouldn't call it a Pokemon.
So 2 or 3 seasons ago, and I'm telling you, it was living like Togekiss, Deagleams, and stuff, Moonblast from Stab Fairy Mons, right? With an Assault Vest, which with a 4 times weakness is crazy good. It's crazy good. That's insane. So honestly, and I don't know, I didn't use it that much, so like I'm a little experienced. I brought it once and it swept. Um, so I don't necessarily like. I don't know. I'm not necessarily the most experienced despite drafting it, but I think it's deceptively bulky. Like I think it's like really bulky, and until you realize it, I think it can become a massive threat. And it has such solid offense and physical and special coverage where it's. I don't know. I think Guzzlord pretty underrated.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree. I just think that like on my critique of this team being a little bit on the frail side, it like straddles the line between the really bulky mons like Golisopod and Metagross and like some of the frailer ones like Lycanroc and Wims.
I can agree with that.
So with that, we can move up to number 9, which is the Lake Erie Wishy Washies. So what are y'all thoughts on this team?
I'll let Gumi go first.
Okay, sure. I think I probably rated this like 9. Is a really just solid overall pretty well built team. Personally, I think that I don't necessarily like the lack of offense. But it's gonna be really hard to break this team down. Even like as a hyper offensive player, it's gonna be really hard to break down some of the bulk here, right? You have Suicune, which is very bulky, Togekiss, which is annoying. Kimo is actually, despite its fairy weakness, is also very, very bulky. And then I just think that it's got good tailwind mode, it's got follow me. I think it's gonna be a pretty hard team to break, to be honest. Actually, kind of now looking at it, I'm a little. I don't necessarily think it's as good as 9, but it's just a strong team. Got some good stuff, good modes.
Yeah.
Well, I ranked this team, I think, around 14. I didn't like how. I guess I didn't really like how Togekiss centric this team is. Like, this team has a lot
Yeah,
of
I agree.
members that enjoy setting up, and I feel like if you can break Togekiss, then it shortcuts a lot of the offensive potential this team has with Swords Dance, Clangorous Soul, Shell Smash. I mean, even Flareon needs a turn to set up just to have, like, Toxic Orb go off for it. So that's like my biggest critique, and like Togekiss is a good mon. It's a great flexible mon, and one of the strengths is that it is flexible. But when you draft this kind of comp around it, it leads me to think that Togekiss is basically going to be bulky follow me 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So that makes it a lot easier to prep for when I don't have to really think about its offensive capabilities. That being said, I like the Haunter. I think Haunter is a steal in tier 5, and it probably won't remain down there for much longer. It's a great EV Light mon, great budget Trick Room setter, and basically all the fun of Gengar before it lost Levitate. I think Raichu is an amazing support piece, especially for this team, offering Lightning Rod support. Not quite sure why the X-Cloud is there, but I mean, it is a low tier pick, and he did need a normal type, and it has a little bit of synergy, I think, with some of the other pieces on this team. But yeah, other than it just being like a little too Togekiss centric for my liking, it's a fine team.
Yeah, I don't have too many strong opinions about this team. Honestly, it's a little bit annoying that it doesn't have any psychic resists at all. So it definitely can be a pretty annoying for especially against like the two psychic terrain teams. But other than that, I think they have some good offensive threads, and like Mamoswine and Lucario, they have good setup threads like Cressel and Komo, and you know some of the some of the more non-setup ones are a little bit frailer. So them having follow me is pretty helpful with that. And then I think Raichu is just a good support and fake out mon. Huh?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that, let's move up to number 8, which is the migrating melodics. So I guess we'll throw it to Miss Mag. What are your thoughts on the team?
Well, the first thought of the team is I realized I made a slight error when I ranked it. I ranked it as 10 when I already had another team as 10. So this is really my 6th ranked team, which is great because it's around rank 8. I think this is a really strong team. There are some really disgustingly offensive pieces here in Spectre, Garchomp, Musharna, Azumarill, and Electivire. And he's also got some nice support pieces with it. Hitmonchan, Volcarona. Volibee is actually really stupidly good value for tier 5, I think, in my opinion. And I'm actually keen on Skuntank. I was going to draft it this season myself, but it doesn't fit my composition. More on that later. But overall, I think he's drafted like a really strong team that kind of centers a little bit around the Volcarona. Like there's a few setup mons here that benefit from the redirection support. My biggest critique about this team is like I don't really like the Skarmory. Like I get like needing the typing. I'm not super keen on Skarmory being like just I'm not super keen on Skarmory as a mon, just really in general. But like I guess like it just doesn't seem like it's really doing too much here. Blossom is actually not terrible for like just a grass type in tier 5, which is good to deal with bulky waters, which I can see this team having a little bit of trouble versus, especially the water ground ones where Electivire is of no real use to you. But yeah, that's about all I could say about this team. Otherwise, it's pretty solid.
Okay. Brave is my boy. But I rank this team like 21, 20. I don't like this team at all. Now, you guys know I like Garchomp, but I don't think that this team really does a good job around its tier 1s. I think Garchomp and Spectre are both really solid offensive mons that can really go in, but I don't really like Volcarona as the only support. And then other than Spectre, Garchomp, Volcarona, and Zumaro and Musharna, I don't really like many of the other mons on this team. And I know that's a little sus considering that, you know, Batista likes Skuntank and I know Miss Mag likes Hitmonchan. But I really number one, I really dislike the Bolton to Electivire trade, especially at this point of the season. But I I really I don't know. I struggle with this team a lot, and I don't like Volibee. I don't like Skarmory. I don't think they're that good, and I think I don't know. I'm really not a fan of this team, like at all. Um, it's got some good offensive pieces, which you guys know I like, but I just think it struggles to support those pieces, and I have a hard time putting this team above like 18, 19.
I can see some of the complaints. I personally really like the Garchomp, Volcarona, Azumarill core. I think that is very powerful core. They all kind of synergize off each other to a certain extent. They're all kind of good switch-ins for each other, and the Rage Powder kind of can protect both of the other ones. Um, I think that Spectre is generically a good mon. I think Skuntank and Hitmonchan are very good mons for their tier. But I can't agree with that. Volibee and um, Blossom are like kind of middle like medium for me. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely like it more. Like I like the team overall as a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I do agree with one thing that Gumi said about the timing specifically of the trade. I'm not super keen on. I think the Bolton should have at least lasted just a week in practice. I think it's really hard to make trades outside of Grace in that like intervening period between Grace ending and actually playing your week one. I think it's really hard to decide on making trades like that because you haven't gotten to really test anything. So unless you're really convinced that there's a mon that you can use a lot better than something you've drafted, that's really the only reason I would say making a trade in that window specifically. And according to Brave, he seems to think that that is the case with Electivire, so I'll be curious to see how he uses it.
So with that, we can move up to number 7, which is the Tentacle Pirates. Um, so I guess I'll just throw it off to Miss Meg.
Yeah. So I, where did I even rank this team? I thought this team was pretty cool. I ranked it as number 9. Definitely a top 10 team. There's modes here like crazy. Rillaboom, Drifloom, Heatran, Landorus is just like stupid. I think they're very strong offensive pieces coupled with good support. I also like the Mesprit adds some bulk and just more levitate pressure that makes you less likely to want to bring ground moves versus a Heatran. And I also think Judigion is really good value for its tier and being a Trick Room sweeper. That's kind of where my love for this team kind of stops. Like it's like those 6 mons, and then like um, the Scrafty. I'm not a huge fan of Scrafty. I've never really like enjoyed using it, and while this team does have a fair amount of fairy resist, like it's just all right. Helios seems a little bit out of place on this team, but I guess you could argue it's drawing in like water moves for like Heatran and Landorus, but then you just hit them with other things instead. Tentacle pick, I always respect drafting your mascot like 100%, and there's legitimate like bulldoze weakness policy shenanigans that can be done, so that's all right. And then Carbink and Dowblade they're like all right tier 5s. I don't think they're like anything special. Carbink is actually a surprisingly good trick room setter because like sturdy mental herb, a little bit difficult to break. But yeah, it's a cool team. I'll be excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, honestly, if I was to describe this team, it's just solid stuff. Like I just think it has a lot of good solid stuff. I don't necessarily feel like there's a solid major weakness. I just think it's just good. Um, really boom Landorus, lots of good offense. I'm not sure how I feel about Driftbloom, but like I don't know. I do like the fact that he got Tailwind. Um, and I think he covered his weaknesses fairly well. I'm a little concerned about the ice weakness just because I don't like Tentacruel and Two Blade as two of your resists. But other than that, I like this team a lot.
I definitely I think Driftbloom is fine. I think setting up Tailwind next to a Rillaboom, letting him do Woodhammer is always powerful. I think that like overall, I think the long and short of it is I generically like pretty much every mod on their team. I think that they go fine together, but nothing super exciting. And so I think the team is definitely a good team, but it's not like it doesn't have anything that like draws me in as like, this is the best team. It's kind of where I'm at. It's like I like Mesprit, and I think it's a solid mod. I think that Rillaboom is powerful. I think Landorus is powerful, but yeah, like nothing excites me per se.
I actually will agree with Gumi on the Drifloom. I think it's a good mod on this team. In fact, I actually think it's downright essential. Because the tailwind pressure off the Unburden is actually really strong here. Whereas this team might struggle with really faster teams otherwise. But I agree it's a little bit kind of cumbersome next to like Rillaboom because like it's a little bit easier to I think debuff Rillaboom than say like the classic like Lele Drifloom kind of core.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I still think it has a really nice role on this team, just being a really supportive kind of pain in the butt, and just adding, if nothing else, it's another ground immunity for Heatran. Like the team is very kind of a little bit kind of Heatran centric, which is I'm not the biggest fan of Heatran and non-max, but I think this team was constructed nice enough around it and its other sort of ground weak mods that it gets a pass.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think you need Driplim on this team. I just would have preferred another Tailwind mod, right? But I think you need that Tailwind. However, like, yeah, as you said, I think it's gonna work. Like, it's got some good stuff. Um, and I think there's a lot of creative mode stuff you can do here. So, yeah, I like this team. I just think it's a really just solid team.
Okay, so with that, we can move to number 6, which is Miss Magical Marauders. Well, I guess I'll throw it to Gumi first.
Yeah. I helped this coach prep, um, or not prep, but draft a little, despite not doing much. But I, I don't know. I like this team. I think it's good. Got some good stuff. Got some good modes. I don't know if I like it at 6, but I like Torntherian a lot. Incineroar obviously had a great breakout season last season, and I love Azelf and Duraludon and Circuitry. Great mons. I'm not a fan of lack of kind of physical offense, um, fast physical offense specifically because Durant isn't that in this format. So that's my one complaint, but it's just a really solid team. And I think deceptively, um, I don't know how to say it, but I think it looks deceptively passive.
So I'll go up. I really like the Thunderous, not Thunderous, Tornadus Incineroar Circuitry core. Um, the Regenerator on Tornadus with U-turn, the parting shots on Incineroar, and the Volt switches kind of do pretty well. The combination of like super offense and more support leaning, and also a fairly fast tailwind user. I definitely like those. I think that the Trick Room mode is pretty solid, with Jellicent and Shiinotic and Marowak and even Girder to a little bit. I think Girder is definitely a good tier 5 mod in the general sense. I'm not the biggest fan of Azelf in the general sense, and but I do like the Durant on this team specifically. I think it can do some work, especially with good fire switch ins in Incineroar, Jellicent, um, and Miltank. So, any thoughts on your team, Miss Mag?
Yeah, I actually am really honestly surprised it was ranked this high. I thought, for me personally, I ranked my team at like number 11. I did not think people were as high on it as clearly you guys are higher on it than I am, and I'm the coach. But I will say that out of the 3 seasons that I have spent in the VDL, this is probably my most favorite team that I've drafted. Like
Yeah.
for week 0. This is also the first time I've never used any grace trades when constructing my team, which I think atones for how well put together I believe it is and how well spotted I did, at least during the drafting process. I will say that this team it was like I didn't come in with like a really clear plan. Like Incineroar fell to me at 22, and I was like, well, Yeah, sure. Like I've never used it before. I've never even drafted Intimidate before. So I decided, and I really wanted to use Circuitry. Like that was kind of one of the main things I did want to use this season. So like Incineroar, Circuitry, the Torn, because Circuitry really benefits from the fast Tailwind. Like it kind of, and then Jellicent is just a nice kind of complement to Incineroar with like on the weaknesses and providing Trick Room. Like the rest of the team was kind of built around those four. I will agree with you that like I wasn't super keen on Azelf. I actually would have preferred a little bit more bulk, but I actually think that Gumi's point about there not being a lot of physical offense is one area where Azelf is like super helpful because it's very flexible on its offensive stat lines. That's for
I agree.
sure. Big fan of that. Durant is actually really nice on this team because, as you can tell, I don't really I have a slight weakness to like Pheromons in the general sense because like Durant's really the only real resist to it, even though I have like a fire and another steel type, but due to their dual types, they don't technically resist fairy. So having a really fast, hard hitting steel type to kind of bop fairies off the field, I think is like super beneficial. And I'm a big fan of the Girder pick. My only real snipe of this draft is I wish I had an inner focus mon just to have a little bit more counterplay to fake out. So I wanted to draft throw, but our good friend Mad Rex over there, he took it before I could get to it. But I think Girder is a more than reasonable substitute. So yeah, I really like my team. I'm excited to use it.
Well,
Yeah, I agree. I didn't want to say anything about Azelf just because I didn't necessarily want to reveal your secrets, and I think people don't realize how strong Azelf's physical attack is. Um, but yeah, I think that I think that you have some really really strong pieces that do complement each other pretty well, and Azelf is one of those pieces where it's got some nice stuff. So
all right, so continue it on. We can go up to Mad Rex since we were talking about them. So Mad Rex is number 5. I guess I'll start it off with it. So I definitely think that their team has some good mons. They very much have been liking that Inteleon. Uh, so they're drafting it again. I think that Latios is a good mon. I like the Rabombi, generally speaking, especially with speed swap with some pretty offensive slow mons like Throw or Palisand. Um, the and I think Nihilego is pretty good. I'm a huge fan of Articuno from my use of it last season. I think it's a very underrated mon. Um, the having double tailwind, having speed swap, I think gives a good ability to have speed control while having some pretty good offensive mons and some fairly bulky mons too. So I guess I'll pass it off to Gumi.
yeah, so I think this team just yeah, I think this team has just got some good stuff. I like Inteleon a lot actually. It's a mon that I was actually looking at because I think it is pretty good. Um, Overall though, I think that this team I really actually like Rabombi on this team, which for the most part is not something I do like, but I think he has some really nice stuff with that Buffalon Rabombi and even like Palisand stuff. Got some good tailwind with Latios. Has a lot of strong special offense. My one problem would be that I don't like the lack of fast physical offense. However, I think Rabombi Buffalon stuff kind of can make up for some of that, and yeah, I think that would basically be my one complaint, but I like a lot of this stuff. Thwacky, Rotom Heat, Inteleon is a really nice FWG core, so yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I guess it's my turn. I am a big fan of this team, and again, I am not. I would say I did my best to not take any coach skill or even sort of coach sort of tendencies into account when I was doing my rankings. But I would be lying if I said that after looking at it like this is a Rex team. It just is a Rex team, and if you've seen him play in previous seasons here at VDL, like you just know what I mean when I say it's a Rex team. It hits hard on both sides, and it's a little bit frail in some respects. I think that would be one of my honest to God real criticisms is really that some like their special attackers in particular can be just a little bit on like the frail side. And like Gumi said, there is a little bit of the slow physical offense but I really like the synergies. I absolutely love the Thwacky Nihiligo pairing with the Grassy Seed to bolster its already really pitiful defense stat, and lower the damage from spread ground moves, which it's quad weak to. I love the amount of anti fake out this team has. There's two inner focus mons, there's a whole ghost type, there's shield dust, there's a pledge combo. There's setup with Rotom, even Articuno providing, I believe it gets Tailwind, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like it just provides like a lot of like nice support. I think my least favorite mon on this team is ironically Palosands. I like ghost types, but I don't know. I'm not sure if Palossand like really fits in. Like I get like needing a ground type and all, but it just seems a little out of place on this team for me personally. But it's a solid team overall.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess one other thing is that they have a couple of pretty slow mons with Nihilego being their only trick room setter, which is a little bit awkward. However, Rabombi with speed swap kind of negates that a little bit. So I don't consider it as a too bad of an issue, if at all. Continuing on, we have number 4, which is the Trixie Tricos. So what are your thoughts on it, Miss Mag?
I'm a big fan of this team actually. I don't remember where I ranked it. I think it definitely was top 10 for me. Actually
Yeah.
number 4. Look at that. I think this team has a lot of disgusting offense potential with the
Yeah.
Thunderous, the Crook, the Absol, the Blaziken. The even Trevenant actually has a respectable offensive stat, and then it's kind of backed up with a lot of really good bulk mons like Uxie, which is the Lake Spirit I was really trying to trade for. Vaporeon, Corviknight are very bulky. Even Mime with filter ability is
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
bulky,
legit.
for sure. And I also love Clefable. It's by far my favorite redirection piece in pretty much all of Pokemon. Been using it for years. The only thing I will say, my biggest criticism of this team, it is, in my opinion, far too physically offensively leaning. Like I don't see too many. I mean, I'll grant Thunderous is very flexible on the offenses, and obviously Clefable and Mime and Vaporeon can do decent damage. But when I just look at this team in a vacuum, I see just physical threats all over the place, which makes it a little bit, in my opinion, easier to prep for, at least with just spreading burns, because you can't really intimidate this team. Corviknight has mirror armor. You run the risk of giving Thundy Defiant. But that is probably like my one real criticism of this team is I feel like it could use like maybe one more kind of in your face special attacker. But it's a solid team, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I agree with that point. It's like what I was saying with Lucian. Like Blaziken and Thunderous can both run special sets, but just that like hard special offense, right? The team's a little lacking on that. However, as you just mentioned, this team has just got a lot of good stuff. Lots of nice combos, lots of nice offense, lots of just really good modes. It's a really, really nice team.
Well, yeah, I personally have to play them week 1, so I can definitely tell you that their team is pretty scary. It's having really fast fake out is always annoying. Thunderous, which is incredibly flexible with either Prankster or Defiant, and having good offensive stats while still being able to be pretty bulky. The incredible possibility of their speed with like Blaziken and like Prankster like Thunderwave stuff is pretty tricky. A Tailwind with Corviknight. I definitely think that I'm not a huge fan of some of their slower modes, but I definitely think that Absol is definitely undervalued. Vaporeon is definitely an undervalued mon that I think are very powerful.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll kind of say to wrap up is I know they weren't like super keen on the Seeking pickup. Obviously, they needed Lightning Rod support. They do have Vaporeon and Corviknight, but I actually really like how Seeking kind of fills its role as an alternate water type within this team. Like this team has a really strong Disquake mode, and then you've just added another discharge kind of flexibility mode where you can also slow things down, and while Seeking doesn't have the most impressive special attack in the world, it's still something just to contend with. Like, it's not just kind of going to be sitting there and like clicking like random buttons. Like, it has a nice support move pool for this team in particular.
And Horn Drill.
And Horn Drill. Who can forget Horn Drill?
Okay, well, anyways, moving on. We have number 3, which is the Crushing Silvalis. So the Crushing Silvalis had I think a lot of debate in our council group chat. So I'll pass it to Gumi and see what they think.
Yeah, I am on the hard. This is not my favorite team, like, at all. Like, and when I said it, I mean, I don't think it's that good. One of the things that, and I know Otto ranked this team like number 2, but one of the things that Otto is always saying is that you don't want a mon that really prohibits your team. You won't want like tier 2 ones that prohibit your tier 1 mons from doing their job. So I think Urshifu in Diddy Ninetales is a great example of this. With Urshifu, it's really hard to like get going when number 1, you have Sun stopping you doing your like surging strike attacks, and then number 2, you have Indeedee, which does extra damage when your opponent is using that psychic terrain. So I don't like that at all. I don't like the fact that the only 2 resists for psychic type moves are Kaparaja and Shiftry. Not that Shiftry is bad, but that like it's just not going to be a consistent psychic type resist, so it just makes psychic terrain really bad on this team. And then on top of that, I don't necessarily like Dragon Ball too much, which is just personal preference. Like, I'll give him that. And I think that like I really would have liked better Tailwind on this team that wasn't Fleshlander. And then it's just a little bit of a weak trigger mode. Even like Kaparaja, I just don't like. I don't know. I don't like the fact that Audino and Kaparaja as Trick Room Sweeper and Setter just overlapping types. But
I mean, those are fair points. I actually ranked this team specifically number 7. I will say that I like this team on paper. There are some sort of anti-synergies that I had to deduct a bit of points from my ranking for, which is why like it ended up at 7. If some of those things actually were a little bit better, I would say I probably would have easily made top 5 on my personal rankings. And again, not taking coach into account. One of the things that I found very disgusting about this team is its damage output is surprisingly very frightening. There's just a lot of really strong hitters on this team. There's Urshifu, there's Dragapult, there's Kaparaja, Indeedee, even Ninetales has a respectable base 100 special attack, and the Rotomo as well. So there's just a lot of offense being thrown at you. And I will admit the defensive pieces are where I kind of have a little bit of my leaning. Like, Fletchender is okay. I would not say it's my favorite choice for a Tailwind setter, but for the tier that it's in and the fact that this team has no other Eviolite Mon user, I think it fits fine here. And it's one of the few times I would ever probably say that like Fletchender actually serves a really good role on a comp. Audino is actually fairly nice in tier 5, considered drafting it myself. I think it's all right. I will agree with you that Audino sharing that fighting weakness with the sort of like the Kappa Raja and the Stone Journer is actually again one of those anti synergies a pick that I mentioned earlier. Just because like really strong CC kind of blows through all that whole mode, and then for the fast mode, really strong sort of rock and flying can kind of also blow through a little bit of that. But again, this team has a lot of offense output. Dragapult is very flexible. I'm not the keenest on it in non-max, but I will respect the fact that it has flexible offenses on both ends and a really good support move pool. But yeah, that's why I ranked it number 7.
So I personally like a lot of the certain aspects of the team. I think NDD is definitely undervalued, and I think that Slurpuff is probably my favorite unburdened mon generally, and so I definitely like that combination. I think Urshifu is, both Urshifus are very powerful in the general sense. I acknowledge that the Sun can make Urshifu some water moves to do a little less. However, I don't really consider that a major dyssynergy. I think their speed tier with Dragapult and then the Unburden on the Slurpuff or the Chlorophyll on the Shiftry is really impressive. And I do think Copper Rush is a pretty good Trick Room mod, or even, not even, or out of Trick Room mod. I'm not a huge fan of Fletchling. I don't think anything really abuses it too much, or Fletchender or whatever. And then Stonejourner, I think, can be very solid, but is very tricky. And so I'm not sure of how much I like it in the general sense.
Yeah, I definitely think there are some nice pieces on this team, but honestly, I would rank this team top 10 if it didn't have Urshifu. That's honestly where I'm at. I just think that like it feels like he wasted a tier 1 pick because of just two major dyssynergies. Number 1, you can't use Aqua Jet. Number 2, Surging Strikes and Aqua Jet is nerfed. Number 3, defensively, Psychic Terrain is worse for your team. So if he switched Urshifu for like let's say a strong tier 1 dark type, I think this would be top 10, probably top 5 easily. But I really don't like Urshifu on this team. This isn't an Urshifu comp.
That's definitely fair. But with that, we can go to number 2, which is the Drowsy Dracozolt. I guess I'll start with this. Celesteela Tapu Koko is crazy combination of tier 1s. They're, in my opinion, very powerful tier 1 mods. I consider them, definitely near the top of powerful tier 1 mods. And then in addition to that, the, Liepard being able to do, Unburden or Prankster with good support is nice. Having a good amount of electric switch-ins and Virizion and Swampert and Flygon is really nice. And I definitely like, generally speaking, I like a lot of the mons. I don't know. That's about it. Like and then also like having fast fake out. So what do you think, Gumi?
Defensively, man, this team is cracked. This team is nice. I'm a little scared for Miss Mag week 1. I don't know, man. This is a good team. I like this a lot. Got some good offense, good defense, nice bulk, good fake out users. A decent, a usable Trick Room mode. Not necessarily the best, but usable. And doesn't rely on it too much, but like can use it depending on the matchup, which I like. And then just some really solid modes. Beat up with a Virizion. There's always something you have to prep for. So this team is just one of those teams where has so many good modes and then just forces you to prep a lot. So I like it.
Well, I won't say too much because I do actually face them week 1, but I will say that I also really like this team. I ranked it number 1. Again, not taking coach skill, playstyle, or tendencies into account. It's just a lot of phenomenally strong Pokemon. Like the BST level on this team on average is like well over 500. So even with some of the sort of the weaker elements of the team, it's still just very hard to break through these mons because they are really strong defensively and offensively. So, there's a lot of needing to play around specific playstyles and strategies that can make a misstep very punishing by this team. That being said, this team also has some of my favorite mons in Pokemon on it. I am a huge Salazzle fan. I think it is one of my favorite fire types, if not my most favorite. I have Celesteela in another league. That's a Dynamax league, but it's just still unpredictable and has in my opinion, more viable stall lead sheet set in non-max than it ever probably would in a max setting. I like Flygon, big Flygon fan. Like Virizion as well. Um, yeah, it's just a lot of like strong pieces. He's got fast fake out. He's got 2 very clearly defined modes in the beat up and the unburden. He's got Frisk, and I think Orbeetle is just a solid kind of package deal of them on together. I think my opinion, the only weak point in this team, and I would like to think he won't use this to prep against me, but we'll see. I don't think Poltegeist is like super strong here. It's one of its biggest things is like the Shell Smash gimmick, and it's or mode rather, not gimmick, but shell smash mode, and its move pool, like coverage wise, is actually pretty poor outside of that. And I mean, other than setting up next to Salazzle, I don't really think it offers too much to this team. I think a different, slightly maybe bulkier ghost type might be more beneficial. But that's about the only real weak point I could personally say about this team. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the team overall, and I think it's great. I put it, I think, as one as well, and so. But with that, we get to see who the actual number one is, which is the Baltimore Pangorials, which once again is ranked number one. So I'm going to start it off because personally, I did not rank it that high. I think I put it around the 10 or 12 range personally. So I think that I I definitely don't value the sand mode as much as some other people. I'm sure. I definitely like the Goomer sand mode notably better. In addition to that, I think that I'm not a huge fan of Glalie or Toycat, generally speaking. I'm not a huge. I think that Tyranitar is a mon that really wants speed control, and I'm not a huge fan of Articuno as your speed control package. However, there are a lot of powerful Pokemon, a lot of high stats, and a lot of these Pokemon. Fake Out, Intimidate, Trick Room, Redirection. So I can definitely see it. It definitely has a lot of powerful things going for it.
Yeah, I don't like the ground weakness on this team, but other than that, super strong offensively, really nice pieces. It just, um, like I can see the problem with the sand mode. Um, however, just the fact that you have Torracat with beats a lot of those physical ground types. With Intimidate, you got Tangrowth as well, beats a lot of those physical ground types. You got Articuno. I think it just it he did a good job of covering that. Um, and I think especially offensively where you have Primarina. Um, so yeah, I think I agree that Glalie isn't the best pick, but overall, I think this team is pretty nice and can do some work.
Yeah, I this was actually my personally rated this team number two. I agree with the ground weakness not also being my favorite thing, and consequently that Articuno Galar is not my favorite sort of package again for that sort of Tailwind Trick Room combo. However, I will say that he has really, and I mean really well supported that sand mode by not only drafting competitive, but drafting Defiant as well, alongside Intimidate. Like, I could not think of a better sort of trio to kind of center around some of those really pivotal offensive pieces. Like, some of these guys are like really bulky, and a common strategy is to kind of like, you snarl, you breaking swipe them down, you kind of just like chip them and lower their stats. But that's just so difficult with this team because of the threat of boosting an offensive stat from even something like Phalanx is not exactly a pushover. And then you have a really good trick room, like dedicated trick room setter in the Kofa Grigas. You have the redirection to get that going. I'm actually more of a fan of the Glalie pick on this team probably than others, just because I think that it's a nice inner focus mon that can provide speed control without worrying about fake out, which is really nice, or have priority to proc certain weakness policies, which is also really nice. Combine that with just naturally fast fake out of your own with Persian, and I think you have a solid team on the whole. Yeah, but that's why this was my number two team. Yeah.
So with that, here is the final rankings for everyone. Like we said, this is just our opinion, so don't feel too bad if you rank low. However, maybe you can see some weaknesses with your team. Maybe make some trades if we point them out, or prove us completely wrong and show us the strengths of your team that we didn't notice. Any final thoughts from y'all?
This is rigged. Metronome's number one, me number two. But yeah, I think it's gonna be a good season. Got some good teams going. Um, and I'm actually a little curious to see how some of these teams are ranked kind of low. Um, see how they do, because I think there is some nice stuff on basically every single one of these teams. So
Yeah, I think my only real point of wrap up is next week's power rankings will definitely be a lot more indicative when we can take coach skill and gameplay into effect. So definitely don't harp on this sort of week zero's theory modding sort of power rankings. Show us what you got, and don't sleep on anybody, no matter where they are.
Okay, so with that, I hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.